Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Both Sides Book Club.
Can you believe that we are on episode number 4?
It has gone so quickly.
I know, it's so exciting and so awesome. And the thing that makes me so excited is seeing all of you sending in your videos and photos of reading along with us.
And your comments.
Yeah, exactly. When we see them, it gets us so excited. So thank you for joining the conversation and becoming part of the Both Sides Book Club community. It's awesome. So in this episode, we are discussing The Recovery of Rose Gold by Stephanie Wrobel. I hope you liked it. The reason I selected this book, well, firstly, I absolutely love a psychological thriller.
Don't we all?
I know. As soon as like a crime and a thriller and then throw in this psychological twist, I'm like hooked. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Also, I selected this book because there's actually a true story behind it. There is a real life Rose Gold called Gypsy Rose and a real life Patty called Dee Dee.
Yeah.
It's a true story. This is loosely based on the true story.
Yeah, which I actually didn't know until after you told me.
Yeah, and it is chilling. Like, the true story is like, it's so messed up. So I was so excited when I saw this book because it gave me a little bit extra. It gave me another taste of what I had already learned. So there's actually a television series based on the true story called The Act. So I highly recommend you all to watch it if you've read the book and you enjoyed it. I
haven't watched it yet, but I will do.
Yeah, I guarantee you will binge it. So for those of you that don't know the story, I'd like to do a little recap.
Yeah.
So Rose Gold is the daughter, and for 18 years of her life, she was incredibly sick. She was in and out of hospital, in wheelchair.
With a feeding tube.
Yeah, very, very sick. And, members of her community created fundraisers to help pay for her hospital bills, and the whole community was really involved in trying to help Rose Gold with
And
her mum to get through the sickness. But no matter how many times she went to hospital and no matter how many doctors she had seen, nobody could quite figure out what exactly was wrong with her other than her symptoms and that she was very sick. And it turns out that her mum, Patty, was just a very, very good liar and essentially poisoned her own child.
Yeah, slowly and consistently over the years, adding a vomit-inducing drug into her food.
And mixed with psychological abuse as well to convince her own daughter that she is sick. So that's the backstory into the book. But the book actually opens up with Patty getting released from jail. And she's been put in jail because the truth came out about how she abused her child. And as she comes out, she has absolutely nowhere to turn to. So she turns to Rose and asks for her to be taken in. And much to the community's surprise, Rose agrees and takes her in. But what we find out is that Rose Gold has been waiting a very long time for her mother to get released so that she can seek her revenge. So that's what's happening in the book. We see Rose Gold taking revenge. So what did you think of the book? Did you like it?
I didn't. Yeah, I did enjoy it. I mean, like you, I'm a sucker for a good psychological thriller. This was a real page turner. I think, what is it about psychiatric conditions, like particularly personality disorders, that we all are so fascinated by them. And certainly when you told me that it was based on the true story of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard, then that added, a whole other element to it for me. I mean, I think what I like most about the book was the fact that it didn't so much detail the actual abuse. It had the starting point as what came after.
Yeah.
So what happened to them after. In a way, it reminded me of Emma Donoghue's famous novel, The Room. That they later made into a movie, where a young
the before and then you've got the after.
where a young girl is abducted and kept in a very small room for 5 years. She has a son, and ultimately both of them escape. But the book is about, well, how do you recover once you go back out into society? So for me, this was very much that kind of book.
And I don't think it's very often that you do get books that talk about, or movies even that talk about the after. I think so many, you read and hear so many stories where the build-up is all about what's happening, but you never get to unpack how you recover from that.
Yeah. I mean, any kind of victim of abuse, I mean, we see it in the papers all the time. It tells the facts of the case, but you don't, how do you recover? Which I guess goes back to the title of this book, which again I think is a really interesting choice, The Recovery of Rose Gold.
For me, I found it really interesting the way that the story was written, how there were the two perspectives. You flicked between Rose's perspective of what was going on and then Patty's perspective. What did you think about that? Did you enjoy reading the two different perspectives?
I think it worked really, really well, because both of the narratives, both of the narrators, Patty and Rose Gold, were completely unreliable.
Yeah.
So
I know you didn't know who to trust.
If indeed you trusted
either
of them.
Yeah.
And I think it worked really, really well to build the tension throughout the book, going from different perspectives, because you never quite knew what was going to come next. At the same time, though, I have to say, I think Patty's narrative was the weaker of the two, in that I felt that we heard too many of her thoughts. She was almost kind of like a pantomime actor saying, ha ha ha, now I'm thinking this, or little does Rose know, but I'm going to do this next. Whereas I felt that Rose Gold's narrative seemed more natural, and we got more inside her head. What do you think of that?
I agree, but I think, do you think that that pantomime, that ha ha ha, this is what I'm doing next, is also the way that Patty is? That's how she's created this, Rose Gold, she's very dramatic. Oh, my poor child, my baby, and she is kind of like that. She's constantly justifying herself and going, like overbearing, over worrying. And I think you kind of see that maybe a little bit in how she's, in her voice.
I mean, I think that's true. But I guess I wanted more internal dialogue as to her motivations, rather than just an expression of a sort of a fairly superficial expression.
No, I agree, because you get caught between this feeling to begin with, you get caught with feeling sorry for Rose Gold, for everything that she's gone through. And then you see this shift where you then start to feel sorry for Patty. And I think that's because you start seeing Rose Gold's inner thoughts. And I think that's what encourages you to want to know, what's Patty's inner thought? You feel like Patty's quite superficial with her inner thoughts.
Yeah.
But in a way, I actually think that is a useful tool to not get too deep into her psychological thoughts as you're getting deeper into Rose's, because to begin with, you hate Patty. You hate you can't stand her. How could you do this to your child? And I think because she is superficial, you start to think, oh, well, maybe she's not all there, or like, you know, you start to question Patty's, like, what's going on in Patty's head, like, and then I think because you don't know what's going on with her head, maybe you seek more, you can empathize with her a little bit more, because you can't hear, you kind of go, oh, does she have inner thoughts, or is she just really that messed up?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, but I think, you know, it just didn't quite work for me, because, you know, Patty is clever. I mean, she has fooled the whole world for 18 years.
Yes, I know.
So, you know, she's had some experience of working in a medical clinic.
It doesn't add up, does it?
It just doesn't, for me, just doesn't quite add up that suddenly she is so gullible.
Yeah.
I mean, and it could be that maybe she's so egocentric that she doesn't even consider the fact that Rose Gold isn't still her little girl, that Rose Gold may have changed. I mean, and that may be it, is that Patty is incapable of seeing the difference in Rose Gold.
Or maybe, I only just kind of occurred to me now, but maybe even the effects that prison has had on her as well, that maybe that has warped her psychological reality a bit more.
It didn't seem to me that prison had a huge effect on her at all. I mean, she was boasting. You know, she was boasting about how she had, you know, she controlled the other prisoners and had the prison guards on side by playing the same sort of role that she had done all along. I mean, she's very credible. She's very believable.
Yeah.
You know.
But it only just occurred to me now that maybe she was lying about that too. Maybe there was more.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Maybe more happened in prison that we don't. I don't know.
Yeah. Did you find either of them? Did you have empathy with either of them? Because I didn't. You know, I actually didn't like either of the characters.
I think I did. I did. I had, it was like a bittersweet empathy, an empathy where I go, you know what, you guys are so messed up.
Totally.
that I kind of felt sorry for them, that their
Really?
realities were so like warped.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, I kind of feel really bad for you guys. Like you just are so far in your own imaginary world.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Yeah, I did. I kind of felt sorry for both of the characters, for both of their different journeys, but then also as equally frustrated and like, you guys are so messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that Stephanie Wrobel, the author, was very clever in the way she portrayed Rose Gold in that respect, because, as you said, right from the get-go, you know, we hate Patty. We know what she's done, and we think, oh, poor Rose Gold, this poor child is, you know, has ultimately had to go on the witness stand and testify against her mother. Her mother's now been sent to prison.
Meanwhile, she's only just getting a grip of what her mum actually even did to her.
Yeah, exactly. And she's left on her own. Yeah. You know, she's left to sort of, you know, there isn't a big team that swoops in and helps her to adjust. Basically, she's left to cope with all the ramifications and the after effects herself. So certainly at the beginning, you feel really, I mean, I did feel empathy for Rose Gold, but as the narrative goes on and you start to see what Rose Gold has actually been doing during that 5 years, and then obviously then when Patty is released, you realise that Rose Gold is just as manipulative, that she lies, and that, you know, that really, and even the revenge, you know, she really is not a very nice person at all.
No. I think for me in the story, and I want to ask you what you think, there's two main relationships, one of them being obviously Rose Gold and her mum Patty, and then there's also quite a polar opposite relationship, which is Rose Gold and her father.
Yeah.
And on one hand, you've got the relationship with her mum, which is super claustrophobic, overbearing, overcaring, just in your face. And then you have her father's relationship, which is the complete opposite, which is withdrawn, abandonment, all of this. And like, how do you think that one, or how Rose Gold even manages to navigate between the two? And with her friend, the so-called friends in the story as well, do you think that they helped navigate sort of a middle ground of what sort of relationships is normal?
No, and no. I think I don't think Rose Gold was able to have any kind of normal relationship. I mean, the way that she grew up, she had no grounding in what is normal, how to behave. Her mum homeschooled her.
No friends.
So she had no friends. She had no social contact other than visiting doctors and nurses and so on, in which case she was schooled by her mother how to behave and how to respond. So she had no toolkit whatsoever for beginning to negotiate or to find her way into a normal relationship. And we see how, she uses what skills she has got, manipulation.
Or what she's learned.
What she's learned,
is
manipulation, lying. And I think you also have to question certainly the father and why he chose to then approach Rose Gold.
I was wondering about that too.
I mean, what sort of belated sort of sense of guilt?
Yeah.
Again, that was a little bit strange. Or it could be that he genuinely did feel guilty, but then quickly realised that he'd bitten off more than he could chew.
Yeah.
That Rose Gold's needs was so overwhelming that there's no way he could neatly slot her into extra daughter into his life.
I think as well, from an interesting perspective, psychologically with Rose, is so much of her life as well, people had felt sorry for her and felt like, oh, poor Rose Gold. Like the whole community had come together to fundraise for her, and it had always been like, oh, poor Rose Gold, poor Rose Gold. So I wonder in a weird way if that makes you really egocentric, because you're used to everybody like caring about you so much and feeling sorry for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, quite possibly, there was that relationship between Patty and Rose was symbiotic in that Rose learnt how to get a sympathetic response from her mother in just the same way that Patty was manipulated her. So, quite possibly Rose viewed other people in that kind of way, in the feeling that yes, she was special. And then of course she found out that she wasn't. The other two main relationships I think were her friend Alex, who obviously wasn't a friend at all, was using Rose to to sort of jump on the notoriety, the famous
charity
bandwagon, and the relationship with the guy that she met online, which obviously was completely fake.
Yeah.
He was a middle-aged man, so there was no truth whatsoever in that relationship. The people that Rose chose to begin to have relationships with, it was a no-hoper really from the start, and she responded badly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. I felt really. She was just so messed up.
So obviously we know from the Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose Blanchard case that Dee Dee was suffering from a psychological personality disorder called Münchausen by proxy syndrome. It got us thinking, and we were really, really interested to find out more about this illness. I mean, like, how often does it occur? So we thought that we'd call a friend. So in a moment, we're going to be talking to a clinical psychologist and asking her a few questions from a professional
point of view.
Perspective about this syndrome, so that we have a better understanding and that we can give you guys some answers too.
Hi Judy, how are you?
Hi Katie, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on to our episode at Both Sides Book Club. We're so excited to have you here with us.
You're welcome.
To get started, we thought maybe could you introduce yourself a little bit and also tell all of our listeners what you do for a job.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start there.
Okay, yep. So I am Judy Robinson, that's my name, and I am a clinical psychologist, and I've been in private practice around the Gold Coast, Northern Rivers region for about, not very long, about 27 years or so.
Oh, you're a beginner.
Yeah, ready for a rest.
So, as we've spoken a little bit, we wanted you to come onto the episode and talk a little bit with us because the common theme in this book is Münchausen by proxy. And we felt like it was something we didn't know much about and wanted to delve a little bit more into understanding basically all what encompasses it, and also to let our readers know.
Yeah, because I think there's kind of almost like a pop psychology about Münchausen by proxy syndrome that it's something that pops up from now and again, and people are always fascinated by it. So we would value your professional opinion to actually give us some facts about the syndrome from a psychologist's perspective.
So to start off with, we thought maybe could you talk a little bit about what Münchausen by proxy actually is?
Okay. Yes, I think you're right. It has kind of got a name out there. It's kind of got this elusiveness to it, and people are really curious about it because it's, I guess it's kind of frightening and quite hard to comprehend that someone would behave in that way. And I think the name Münchausen by proxy originally was coined in 1977 to describe what was more like a medical abuse of children, and it has been renamed in 2013 and has been renamed according to psychiatric psychological diagnosis in the DSM-5. And the name for Münchausen by proxy now is factitious disorder imposed on another. So it's not as it's not such a sexy name, but it's kind of trying to actually define that this is actually a serious, significant mental health disorder, and we need to view it as such, and that there is a treatment protocol that we can use to approach this. But I guess because it has that other side, which is the outcome and the consequence of this disorder, is significant in that it's like the fabrication and inducement of medical and psychological symptoms in children, and that is dangerous and sometimes even deadly, sadly.
How common is it? I mean, how and why does it present itself?
So it's not very common, and I guess the understanding is that it's probably not being noticed. It's being kind of underreported. But in Australia, the only statistics that I've actually come up with, because I'm not an expert, I did have a little look at this, was that in, I think it was 2005, the estimate was between 15 and 24 cases per annum per year in Australia being reported. And in the States, they are estimating around 1% of people presenting to hospitals are really presenting with some kind of factitious disorder.
So that's actually quite significant. But it's still quite significant.
Still significant, exactly.
Yeah.
Are there varying degrees of it? I mean, in the book, it's presented as quite an extreme case, but are there varying degrees of it?
It's difficult to diagnose, and the varying degrees really only exist between the fabrication and the inducement, because I guess fabrication in some ways could be perceived as less dangerous than inducement. And in fact, I guess there's no inducement is where they're actually, perhaps poisoning a child systematically or suffocating children, whereas the fabrication is really just to have contact with medical professionals. Where the difficulty with diagnosing is that we also have a significant proportion of parents who actually are anxious about their children's health.
Yeah.
And so, it's controversial in that sense, and, paediatricians in particular and GPs and hospital health practitioners are really trying to tease out the difference between those because of, it has been misused, that Münchausen by Proxy Syndrome name has been misused and accusations have been made inappropriately. So that's how it's presenting, is usually to GP practices, paediatricians' offices, hospital emergency departments, occasionally psychologist's office, but I guess the thing about the fabrication is that these people are very deceptive. So they'll, if there's any slight hint they're going to be noticed, they'll change practitioners.
Yeah. And we saw that certainly in the novel. Is that the mother Patty skipped from doctor to doctor to doctor, and I think in the real life case on which this story is loosely based, I was reading that the mother said that all the medical records had been lost in Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, where they'd been living. So they moved state, and so no records could actually be found.
I'm interested to know, how you would differentiate the difference between. How am I going to word this? I think, like, when I was doing a bit of research on it, I saw that misconception between hypochondria and also the syndrome, and I thought maybe could you explain to us a little bit about the difference between the two? Yeah.
Okay. So hypochondria is an anxiety, and it's a natural, to some extent, anxiety, particularly when we suffer significant health issues. And whereas this diagnosis of factitious disorder is an intentional fabrication.
Right.
So it's really comes from a different psychological functioning. The psychological functioning around the fabrication or the inducement is usually coming from some kind of personality disorder. There's often a history of intergenerational trauma and difficult parent-child relationships. If you trace back, the person who suffers from the disorder might have had something occur in their own family, and that might have occurred systematically across the generations, in fact. And there's also a genetic component that's been likely identified that's related to this particular disorder.
Wow,
that's different from somebody who's suffering from, say, hypochondria or anxiety.
Yeah. So what is the so if somebody does have factitious disorder and is creating is abusing their child in this way, what is the point of it? Presumably it's not to harm the child. So is there some sort of attention seeking, or what is the motivation behind it?
Yeah, I think the general consensus is that it's something around attention that you just pointed to, Deb.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's seeking nurturing, and seeking nurturing particularly from health practitioners. And there's a very specific kind of nurturing from a specific kind of status. And often these people are highly educated and actually know medicine back to front themselves and have studied and you know, kind of find a way to interact at that level, which is very unique to how they present, which is also different to someone who's anxious, actually. So the why is still an unknown. You know, it's a mystery, just like the human mind is still a mystery to most of us. But there is some general consensus that it's around that need, that nurturing, seeking contact, seeking attention.
Quite generally, it gets put in the category of a parent-child relationship. But can you also have fictitious disorder with, say, a sibling or a spouse or somebody else, or is it only specific to a child?
Well, I think that's why they opened it up to imposed on another, because, yes, generally it's a caregiver and a child. But I guess the possibility is that this occurs in other ways, in other kinds of relationships, and there's definitely some interest in that. I don't know that I haven't seen the evidence or the research on it, but I think that's for sure, Catie. I think it's a good point.
Because I can imagine seeing it with like grandparents or reversed as well. So if your parent was starting to get sick and on their way out, I could see. Oh gosh, now I sound like
don't get ideas.
No, but I can see. No, I would. You can't even say that. Yuck! No, not yuck. Oh no, I'm sounding discriminative. No, we can't even say that. Oh, I'm getting flustered.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
No, but I can see how. If it can be categorized to a broader spectrum, I can see how that could happen, right? Yes.
It's but what happens, of course, is grandparents aren't necessarily having as much access to children.
Yeah.
You know, so and if say if our partner was trying to impose it on us, we're grown up enough and mature enough and sensible enough to stand our ground. So it's just that I guess children are vulnerable to caregivers, and that's where the power dynamic comes into play.
Yeah, and it seems that often, or certainly from what I've been reading, that it occurs in family situations where often there is only the parent, usually the mother, and the child, possibly siblings, but it's not normally what we would consider to be a fully rounded family with multiple adult members. That there's often kind of like a one-on-one sort of relationship. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess I don't know enough about it. That's definitely the stereotype.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
But I don't know that the research is really...
Okay.
We have enough research to actually validate that.
Okay.
And, you know, I guess the other thing we're seeing more and more of these days is this kind of internet-based factitious disorder where people are kind of putting on social media that they might have a particular something or other, or that their child has particular something or other, and so this is kind of lived through the internet, these kinds of...
Wow, that's a really good point, because you definitely see that a lot writing in.
And other kinds of deceptions
often for pecuniary reasons, that you know that they're trying to fundraise and
so then what would constitute it to like, for example, say a mother or a father was writing in on Facebook about, you know, what would then constitute that then to be placed as a disorder or part of the syndrome? Is it disorder or syndrome?
Well, this is why they changed the terminology.
Okay.
Münchausen by proxy was called a syndrome.
Yeah.
And it was just like a make-up thing by a professor, Roy Meadows, actually, in 1977. And it was really that's why it's been renamed, because it's a serious disorder, but it had this flavour of something that could be used as a way of blaming parents for being bad parents.
Okay.
Or,
So then
things that weren't necessarily their fault.
Yeah. So then what does constitute it to be placed then as fictitious disorder? So, like, you've got the people that are, like, where's the line, basically, where you would start as a professional?
So the line is that, in the DSM-5, there's certain criteria that have to be met to reach the diagnosis.
Okay.
And those criteria then place that person within the categorisation of the diagnosis. And then it's treated as a disorder.
Yeah, you mentioned very briefly earlier that there is a treatment protocol that professionals would normally follow. What interested me about this novel was that neither Patty, who's the mother who goes to prison, or Rose Gold, the daughter, seem to have any kind of mental health plan or counselling and so on, which I found quite astonishing. How do you think that that's realistic? I mean, would that happen in Australia? I mean, can you comment on that?
Yes, I think that's realistic. I think that's part of the subterfuge. Is that that there's an avoidance of seeking treatment.
Yeah.
And even in Australia, usually it's identified by medical practitioners, paediatricians, GPs, hospital staff. And it seems currently, and this hopefully will start to change, but currently it's seen as a child protection issue.
Right.
And not necessarily seen as, so this person has some mental health issue that requires treatment.
Yeah.
Because if also the treatment is difficult to offer to somebody who actually denies that they have a problem.
Okay, so the treatment can't in fact be enforced on someone. They have to seek it.
So what would, I mean, can you explain a little bit about what the treatment would be? So say, for example, a case that it gets determined that the caregiver has this disorder. The child now is in diagnosis being in a threat. So what are the steps? What happens if it's taken into the hospital professional world?
So if somebody is being treated for the factitious disorder imposed on another,
that's a mouthful, isn't it?
That's what Münchausen by proxy is just like. I assume that that would be based on an assessment of what they're willing to participate in. There'd probably be some kind of a cognitive behavioural therapy program that would be tailored to that individual, that would support them, probably trauma-informed because of the likelihood of there being trauma, and possibly also informed by other therapies that are used to treat personality disorders. So there'd be a specific program of treatment tailored to that individual.
How likely is it that if it goes undiagnosed, that then the child would also carry, you mentioned that there's elements of a genetic trait, but how likely is it that that child would then impose similar behavioural methods?
Or behaving the same way.
Because you sort of see that a little bit with Rose Gold in the novel, that the way she justifies things.
She's vindictive. She lies. She's a master manipulator, and ultimately is very vengeful.
But in a way of coping, like it seems in the novel that's just the way that she knows. That's her reality. That's how she knows to get what she wants. So how likely is that would happen?
Yeah, I guess. We do know that it's possible to live with a parent with a mental illness and not develop a mental illness. That's for sure. And again, I can't quote the statistics on it, but it's possible to not develop a mental illness and be raised by a parent with one. But I guess we're also aware of the role of modelling that parents provide in terms of coping strategies. And so she certainly has an increased risk of developing something similar, certainly some kind of disorder herself, Rose Gold.
Yeah.
And I understand her mum also had a history of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And losses. And so,
Yes.
you know, again, there's that intergenerational pattern starting to unfold. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I feel like that's helped us quite a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Very much so. Yes, I mean,
Interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting topic.
It's a really, really interesting topic, and there seem to be so many grey areas in it, which I guess is why
Yes.
it is so difficult to diagnose.
So thank you for coming and answering some of our questions.
I hope it was helpful.
It was It was extremely helpful. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. Great to be in that little space with you.
It's really great. All right. Well, we'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks,
All right.
Judy.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was a really great chat.
That was so interesting.
Yeah, and really educational too. There were a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. Like I think it's so hard to quantify and to diagnose.
So many grey areas.
Yeah, which I didn't anticipate. I thought it would kind of be black and white, but when she was talking about it, the more I realised I can actually understand how it would be difficult to diagnose and and why there are grey areas. Yes.
And I guess if someone doesn't want to be treated, then there isn't actually any method by which you can force someone to undergo treatment.
And why would they want to get treated if they think that they're acting in the best interest of the person they're caring for?
Yeah, there's no acknowledgement. Yes.
It's kind of it's a bit of a can of worms.
Yeah,
really.
Totally. But I think it does put the book into a different framework.
Definitely, and gave me a different perspective on Patty and Rose Gold as well.
I mean, I was thinking about Rose Gold because at the end of the book, I didn't feel sorry for her, but I felt sorrow for her. If there's a differentiation between that, because even though she seemingly does things like she. With her broken teeth, she determines to love her teeth, and she shaves her head, almost as though she is accepting this new person that she has become. I really felt that she hadn't become a new person, that she was doomed to having an equally damaged and unfulfilled and unsuccessul life, and I felt sorrow for her because of that. How did you feel?
Oh, I completely agree, and I think to begin with, when I first read the book, I felt sorry for her that she wasn't able to understand completely what has happened, and I think talking with Judy just now, that's confirmed it in my mind that it's sad in such a complex way, because you see this small development of her recovery, but yet she's had so much trauma that she hasn't really recovered. She's vengeful, and she's the only mechanisms or survival mechanisms that she's learnt have been passed down from her mum.
Yeah.
And that just makes me really sad because, revenge isn't a solution. But kind of what Judy said before is if somebody doesn't recognise that they've,
that they have a mental illness,
then there's no reason why she would recover, because she's only aware of the abuse that she's received, not necessarily aware of the abuse that she's created. Well, what an awesome episode. I feel like I have learned so much and really gotten a lot more out of the book.
And great book choice, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So it's that time of the episode. Drum roll, please. New book is Below Deck by Sophie Hardcastle.
Okay, so this one is, it's my turn.
Oh, finally.
Finally, it's my turn.
Finally your turn.
So my pick for our next read is Below Deck by Sophie Hardcastle. Sophie is an Australian author and this is her first adult fiction book. It's set in Sydney and it's the story of Olivia, who's a 21-year-old student who is a little bit lonely and estranged from her parents. She's befriended by an older couple who introduce her to sailing and the sea.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Cut 4 years into the future and Olivia is doing a delivery of a yacht from Noumea to Auckland. She's the only girl in an all-man crew and something dreadful happens. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you, but but the book is about sexual violence and consent, and how we think about that and how we deal with that. And I hope you enjoy it.
Wow, I'm excited. Sounds good. All right, well, happy reading and we'll see you soon.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed watching this episode.
If you did, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you soon.